So in this training, I'll do a review of how community volunteers are tracked in agency. Before starting with the agency demo, just a quick refresher about what communities are and their role in recovery cafes. So community volunteers are committed to giving back to the community in some way. Community volunteers are not members and are a distinct role from members. Community volunteers do not attend recovery circles. And in general, community volunteers tend to be more stable in their recovery and tend to have reliable sources of support that are outside of the cafe. Community volunteers can support the cafe community in lots of different ways. Some common tasks include being a cafe companion, so having a regular weekly or bi-weekly shift where they spend time in the milieu chatting with members. They might help as a barista in the kitchen with special events, etc. I'm going to head now to the agency homepage to show creating a community volunteer profile. So I'm going to start by clicking the link Add a Member. Again, community volunteers are not members, but their profiles start in the same way, and then I'll show later on in the demo how they're distinct from members in agency. So I will fill in a name and a birth date, click Submit, and then I'll be taken to the more detailed page. Your cafe can then fill in here what demographic information you do track about your members. And then once you've filled out this page and click Submit, that initial profile will be created. So as you might remember from the guest profile, right now this person would technically be a guest since they have a profile created, but they're not enrolled as a member and we haven't yet marked that they're a volunteer. So we're going to right away add in what's called their community volunteer program registration to distinguish them in the system. So that record is added under Cafe Service Records, starting with the link Add a Program Registration. From this form here, you'll, under Basic Info, select as the volunteer, as the program, Community Volunteer, and you'll mark that your volunteer is active and the date that they started volunteering. Make sure to pay attention to this Volunteer Minutes Normal field. So when a community volunteer comes to the cafe, they need to be both signed in as they arrived and signed out as they leave. This is to allow your cafe to keep records of how many hours each of your volunteers has volunteered, which is helpful because it will allow you to give that feedback to your volunteers. It's a common number to be used in reporting, and it's also one of the network's required data points. This Volunteer Minutes Normal field is basically a backup in case you sign a member in and forget to sign them out. So this should be the typical shift length for your volunteer. I'm going to type this in as 120 minutes. So what this would look like, for example, is if this volunteer is signed in today at 2 p.m. and then I forgot to sign them out as they leave and I didn't notice, agency will automatically auto-sign them out to 120 minutes after they arrived. So since I signed them in at 2 p.m., if I forgot to sign them out, at the end of the day, agency will back add that they signed out at 4 p.m. So this is to prevent a volunteer from accidentally being left signed into the cafe indefinitely. So this is the information that you'll add in when you add the registration, and then there's some other details you'll fill out when the volunteer leaves. But for now, I'm going to hit Submit here. And I'm going to now click to reload the profile. And agency, as you can see, now knows this person's a volunteer. It's shown right here that they are a community volunteer. We'll cover this as well in the front door training video, but I am going to go ahead and sign this person in to show what it'll look like. So since they have that member type profile, again, they're not a member, but you'll sign them into this Record a Member's entry box. Click Submit. Volunteers should always come up with this green box if they have an active volunteer registration. And you can see after they've been signed in, there's a box below that says Community Volunteers Present, and it lists my volunteer, and it will list any other volunteers that are signed in for the day with a link to exit. So once the volunteer leaves for the day, I'll click this link Exit, which will serve to sign them out and keep track of exactly how long they volunteered that particular day.